by God. All authority is given by God, says Romans 13. The reverent person, the respectful person, he's a happy person. But he who hardens his heart, that is those who are stubborn against authority, we all know some of those. Maybe you were one of them. It doesn't make you happy. It'll make you miserable. And you'll fall into calamity. So be reverent. Obey the authority that's been placed over you. It's from God for your good. But if you're going to kick against the goads, guess what? It's going to hurt you in the end. Do you know what the goads are, right? They're like little pikes that were either on a pole that somebody driving cattle could prod them forward, or they were attached to a wagon to keep the draft animals moving forward. If the animal got stubborn and didn't want to go, guess what? He got poked. He got prodded. He got goaded forward, you see. Authority is for our good. Without authority, this world wouldn't even exist right now. It would have blown itself up a long time ago. Man would have killed himself off. See, here's the truth. Rebels are rarely happy and they're never safe. That's the truth. Verse 15, like a roaring lion and a charging bear is a wicked ruler over the people. A ruler who lacks understanding is a great oppressor, but he who hates covetousness will prolong his days. Verse 2, we talk about length of rule, this kind of thing. Here it is again. Roaring lions and charging bears, oh my. You see, when somebody wanders into the lion's territory, he roars. And even that weak, anemic lion that hangs around down here in the city zoo, he's got a pretty guttural roar for such an old animal. You see, but when you're in his territory, he roars, and then you know that you've got a problem on your hands. Or a charging bear. Now, how many of you thought, walking through the woods, what would I do if a bear suddenly was standing in front of me? You have absolutely no chance of outrunning a bear. You know that, right? I mean, Usain Bolt, I think, holds the world record in the 100 meters, right? 9.58, I think he ran that in. It's almost 28 miles an hour. It's just a hair under 28 miles an hour. But a bear can run 35 miles an hour. See, if you got a bear charging after you, you've got a real problem on your hands. That's the idea here. And like a roaring lion or charging bear is a wicked ruler over poor people. He's merciless. When that bear comes down on you, you don't have much chance. And wicked ruler is that way over poor people. A ruler who lacks understanding, he's a great oppressor. But he who hates covetousness will prolong his days. People, rulers oppress for the sake of material gain, for the sake of their own agendas. But he who hates covetousness will prolong his days. I can't help that with the context here of father and son, a father sharing wisdom with a son. He's saying, son, someday you're going to be in authority. Maybe it's Solomon speaking to Rehoboam. Rehoboam, one day you're going to inherit this kingdom. You're going to sit on this throne. Don't oppress the people. Serve them. Sadly, Rehoboam didn't do that, did he? He split the kingdom because of it. Verse 17, a man burdened with bloodshed will flee into a pit. Let no one help him. A man burdened with bloodshed, that is a murderer. Murderers will flee into a pit. Somebody commits murder, they typically don't walk into the police station and say, hey, I just murdered somebody, lock me up. That has happened, strangely enough. But for the most part, that's not the way it happens. They usually run and hide themselves. But if he comes to your house, the Father's wisdom says, do not help him. Let him stand before the law. Now understand that murder universally is abhorred. In all human society, murder has been abhorred. It's never been an acceptable practice. And every society has sought to deal with the issue of murder. I'm not talking about manslaughter, and I'm not talking about self-defense killing, but murder, intentional taking of a life. Probably the worst of sins. Such a man needs to stand before the law. Let the law deal with it. Don't keep him from the law, because if you do, what's the chances? Somebody else is going to be murdered. Somebody else is going to be hurt. The Bible gives mankind the responsibility to enforce capital punishment. You'll find it in Genesis chapter 9. God makes it very clear that it is a necessity for mankind to rule himself. And to not do that, and listen, I worked in the prison system in a supermax prison for 15 years. I saw guys who were on death row for years and years and years and years and years. I'm not saying you shouldn't exhaust every appeal or anything like that. There's a due process and it should be used. At the same time, the law needs to deal with such. Verse 18, whoever walks blamelessly will be saved, but he who is perverse in his ways will suddenly fall. Essentially, Proverbs 10, verse 9, he who walks with integrity walks securely, but he who perverts his ways will be made known. Again, integrity is your best defense, and a blameless life, listen gang, a blameless life is a safe life. How many of you are blameless? Okay, we just went over this not 10 minutes ago. Okay, you said, all right. Then you have an eternal safety. Know that. Verse 19, he who tills his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows frivolity will have poverty enough. See, the man who faithfully works his land, he breaks up the hard ground. He plants his seed. He gets out there in the time of the harvest. He will have bread, or he will have plenty of bread. Bread, of course, is emblematic of the staples, the necessities of life. A man who goes out and faithfully tills his land, takes care of business, he will eat, he will have food. But if he follows after frivolity, this is a word we don't use too often, do we? Frivolity. Frivolity, something is frivolous. It means it's something without serious purpose or value. If you follow after those things, then you will have plenty as well. Plenty of nothing. You'll have poverty enough, it says here. Here's the truth, gang, especially in our generation. Don't spend endless hours on your phone playing games and doing things that are essentially without value and think that somehow you're not going to pay a price for it. If you want to eat, then work. And if you're going to sit there and waste time at work doing things that are essentially empty and of no value, then don't be surprised if you're the one who gets the layoff. That's the truth. And Father says to his son, hey, get out there and work the land. You'll have not just bread, you'll have plenty of bread. I like that. Because I'm not saying you'll have all that you need and more. If you have all that you need and more, what's the more for? Taking care of the poor. That's right. Verse 20, a faithful man will abound with blessings, but he who hastens to be rich will not go unpunished. Again, in the previous verse, talks about faithfulness leading to blessing and diligence. We understand that pretty well. What isn't so obvious is the liabilities of running after wealth. There's nothing wrong with working. There's nothing wrong with becoming wealthy. There's nothing wrong with working smart and doing exceptionally well. In fact, the Bible's full of a bunch of guys who did that. But they didn't run after wealth. You see, that wasn't their chief pursuit. And there are certain liabilities that come with running after wealth. Let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 6. Paul speaking to this young pastor. 1 Timothy 6, verses 6 to 10. Now godliness with contentment is great gain. I love that. Godliness with contentment. Standing right before God, being in a relationship with God, being content with what you have is great gain. It doesn't say that great gain brings godliness or contentment, does it? For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. That's Paul talking to Timothy, saying, hey, be careful and teach these things as well. Don't be running after wealth, making that your pursuit, making that your love of money. Love the Lord, pursue Him. Because so many have strayed away from the faith. And I saw it years ago. It was a gentleman. He was a worship leader in the first church that I got saved. Well, the only church I got saved in, but the first church I attended. He was a pretty good guy, you know. I always had a smile on his face and just loved the Lord. That's how I met him, actually. I met him at a little marketing business opportunity meeting, and he mentioned in this meeting in front of everybody that he loved Jesus, and I thought, well, that's pretty odd, you know. And yet, you know, a year later I meet him, like, hey. But, you know, he started getting involved in another business, and then Tuesday nights he wasn't coming around anymore. He wasn't leading worship. He wasn't hanging out in the fellowship. And then weekends, well, there were meetings to be done on weekends, and so now he wasn't in fellowship at all. You know, it's kind of a sad thing, because he really kind of fell away from the faith. Not because he intended to, but because he got his priorities mixed up, and he began to set God aside for the pursuit of something else. And I don't know if he ever got the something else, but I do know that he walked away from the Lord. And I pray now that he's, and maybe he has kind of repented and got right. That'd be a great thing, but no doubt in the meantime he pierced himself through with many sorrows. Lots of regrets as a result of it. So hey, work hard. Bless your boss. Make money and use your money wisely, and God will bless, but don't make it your main pursuit. It'll leave you empty in the end. Verse 21, to show partiality is not good, because for a piece of bread a man will transgress. A man with an evil eye hastens after riches and does not consider that poverty will come upon him. Let's face it, as human beings we are easily corrupted. As soon as you compromise yourself morally, the second time comes a whole lot easier, doesn't it? It's kind of like me. I haven't drunk alcohol in 25 years now. But I guarantee you that if I compromise my own conviction, and this is my conviction, not my conviction being heaped on you, that's legalism. But in terms of my thing with alcohol, I do know this. If I compromise and I drink a beer, a Rolling Rock, you guys probably don't know what that is, do you? It's fine. Good for you. That, you know, it'll go down well, but the temptation for the second one becomes a whole lot easier to fall to. And then it's a third one. And I guarantee you that I would have a six-pack down, and being an alcohol lightweight, I'll be in places that I never intended to be, doing things I never wanted to do. Because one little compromise, I'm so easily corrupt. Well, how much more when you offer somebody a bribe? Once you accept a bribe and you show favoritism, then it's so much easier to do it over and over again. Our hearts are so easily corrupted. It isn't good. And in the end, a man who hastens after riches, well, poverty is going to come his way. He's going to lose it all. You think about all these stories of corporate and political and judicial bribery and corruption, and how many lose everything. They lost more than they gained through the bribe. Sad stories. Verse 23, he who rebukes a man will find more favor afterward than he who flatters with the tongue. Flattery. This is the third week in a row we've mentioned this. And if you look ahead to Proverbs 29, the issue of flattery is mentioned again. He who rebukes a man will find more favor afterward than he who flatters with the tongue. Now, of course, this is in the context of righteousness. And you will find it that if you have to rebuke a man, that he'll like you more for it later on than somebody who comes up and tells him all kinds of things for the sake of taking advantage of him. See, in the end, a man appreciates someone who corrects him for his own good rather than somebody who flatters him for his goods. That's the truth. Again, be careful of flattery. Verse 24, whoever robs his father or mother and says it is no transgression, the same is a companion to a destroyer. Whoever robs his father or mother, now you have to understand, in Israeli society, Hebrew society, this would be unthinkable. In fact, this would be punishable by death, to be that disrespectful to your parents that you would steal from them. I remember when I was a little kid, my father had the Buick jacked up in the farmyard, in the driveway, and told me not to touch it. And like a fool, I went and I touched the jack handle, and the jack handle fell off the jack. The jack didn't move, nothing happened, but the handle fell off. So I went upstairs to my father's room, took his change, and paid all my friends not to say anything. Stole from my father to try to hide my sin, Well, a man who steals from his father and mother says it's not a transgression. He's a companion to a destroyer. And I think in a patriarchal society, it'd be easy for someone to steal from their parents and say, well, it's just my inheritance anyway. But here's the truth, gang, and this is probably for somebody in here in particular. It's not your inheritance until they give it to you or they're dead. It's not your inheritance, and so you're just stealing from them. And really, it's destructive because it destroys a relationship. To steal from somebody is bad enough, but to be stolen, to be taken advantage of by a family member or son or a daughter is particularly devastating. Not just because of the loss of money, because the loss of trust, the breaking of the relationship is destructive. And it's not just stealing from them financial things or material things, but not giving them their due. And Jesus dealt with the Pharisees in Matthew 15 about the very same thing. The Pharisees had this little tradition that whatever they owned was dedicated to God. It was considered Corban. You see, it was dedicated to the person serving God. They were still in control of it. They could still use it, but they couldn't use it to take care of their parents because it was dedicated to God. You see, and so what they got is they were able to take care of whatever they want and never have to take care of their parents because everything they owned was dedicated. Jesus says, you actually nullify the law by this very tradition of yours, you see. It's destructive.